I want to talk a little bit briefly about teams that are quietly lurking out there. We know who are the favorites in all these conferences. We have a good idea that Alabama and Georgia are in a collision course in the SEC. We have a good idea that Michigan and Ohio State are really good in the Big Ten. We have a really good idea that Clemson is fine and probably going to win the ACC and clearly has a leg up in winning their own division with basically a 2-game lead as of right now. But who are the other teams that are lurking, that are outside of that conversation, that have a legitimate shot at the CFP or a conference championship? Because there are teams like that. And some of these teams nobody has talked about. Nobody. Let's start. Who's the first team lurking?
Utah.
Yeah, this is a no-brainer. And even though they lost to Florida, Utah is absolutely still lurking right now out there in the Pac-12. I still think they're the best team in the Pac-12. Remember now, that one loss at Florida, they had the ball inside the 10-yard line, goal-to-go situations 3 times, came away with 3 total points in those 3 possessions. So you could say that they outplayed Florida for the majority of that game. Anthony Richardson was ungodly during that game. And since then, they've been dominant. No one's paying attention, right? You lose in college football and everyone just shoves you to the back burner. But would it surprise you to know that Utah, little old Utah, physical, good defense, run the ball. Everyone's like, oh yeah, Utah's tough. They've won their 4 games since then by an average of 35 points. It's pretty good. Outscored their opponents 184-43. So they are dominating the opposition. Great game this week. Great game. They go to the Rose Bowl and they face UCLA. That UCLA team, by the way, they run the ball better than you think. They stop the run better than you think. That could be a very tough game for Utah and might even be a preview of the Pac-12 championship game. You never know. They've got at UCLA, then they've got home to USC. They still have to go to Oregon during the course of the finish to this year. That's on November 19th. They've got 6 true road games, so they're going to have to earn it, folks. But they are lurking. They are sitting there. And if they were to win out, even with a loss, I do think people would put them in the playoffs. So that's why I've got them there. All right, who's next?
USC.
Come on. Hey, we weren't going to go through one of these and not allow the Oklahoma fans to throw up, were we? This team is really good, in particular on offense. And Lincoln Riley has done an outstanding job. And yes, it can be considered, listen, it's glitz and it's flash. And is it sustainable? I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's sustainable. They've got to start playing better defense. But I will tell you, this is a team that if you're not going to play like great, stout, traditional defense, you better gain possessions for your offense, number 1, and 2, get turnovers. And that's exactly what they do. They lead the country in interceptions. They're athletic enough in the back end, and they produce enough pressure. I won't say it's consistent, but enough. They'll get creative. They'll manipulate their front structure. They get you in an obvious down situation, and they put something that's unique out there in front of your offensive line. You get a little bit of pressure. You get a little overthrow, a tip ball, and then boom, USC gets a pick. They're lurking. They could absolutely, they have the talent on offense to run the table. Will they or not? I'm not sure. I'm not sure because it seems like they're going to get tripped up. They still have UCLA. They still have Notre Dame. And by the way, they've got Washington State this week, and I don't think that's an easy game. Next.
Penn State.
This is another team. No one's talking about Penn State. Just undefeated. Sorry about Penn State. We only had one question about Penn State coming into this year, and that was, did you fix the run game? And they did, and no one's acknowledging it. I am. I think they're in the top 10. There's no other division in football, college football, that has 3 top 10 teams in the same division. So here they are. Here they are. That being said, this Penn State team has answered the questions. They run the ball very well. They got these 2 young running backs. They're really good, and they've totally fixed their run game. Last year, they were 13th, next to last in the Big Ten, running the ball for just over 100 yards per game. This year, 5th in the Big Ten, with 192 yards. So watch out, because if Sean Clifford doesn't have to be the catalyst to moving the ball, and he can go out there and he can operate and he can put his team in the right position and he can be a game manager, which he can be very good at, then this is a dangerous team. That's a team that is lurking. Penn State is lurking. Next up.
TCU.
Nobody is talking about TCU. All that they have done is rolled out there and hammered Oklahoma. They're number 2 in the country in scoring offense. They're number 2 in the country in total offense. This might be the second best offense in the country to only Ohio State. Max Duggan playing unbelievable ball. 74%, 11 touchdowns, no interceptions. Sonny Dykes is a good coach. And if anything, this should really tell you how tough it is to win at Cal. This should tell you exactly how tough of a job Cal is, because Sonny Dykes was just like fledgling in Berkeley. And he goes to SMU, takes that job, does a decent job, moves over to TCU, and bam, here we go. Sonny Dykes is a good coach. That's a good fit at TCU. He's in the right spot in the country where he's from. I remember Spike Dykes, legendary coach at Texas Tech. So this is a guy that, like, he's not at home per se, but he is at home in the region. This is a good fit move for TCU, and this is a really good team. A really good team. I expect them to go beat Kansas this week. I know everyone wants that glass slipper to stay on as long as possible, but TCU is really good, and we need to start paying attention, because in a tough league, this team is undefeated. That's not an easy place to play. They could end up in a position where they're playing for a playoff spot. It's happened before with TCU, and it could possibly happen again. All right, last team that's lurking.
Oklahoma State.
Why does no one talk about Oklahoma State? Oklahoma State is really good. And then I'm reminded, like, Joel checks Oklahoma State's schedule, and it's like, oh, they haven't played anybody. They're just hanging out in the top 10. No one noticing. 4-0. Again, horrid schedule. They're unbeaten. They don't have to go to Iowa State this week. Or excuse me, not this week, this year. Why do I say that, Joel? Well, look at what happened the last couple of times that they took really good teams to Iowa State. In fact, undefeated teams to Iowa State. 2011. Last year, Iowa State giving them their only loss. So now they get to avoid the one spot that they desperately want to avoid, which is at Iowa State. And they avoid that. All of a sudden, in the back end of this schedule, they're going to have the strength of schedule that's going to start to make up for their horrendous non-conference. They'll have number 17 TCU on the road, number 20 Kansas State, and number 19 Kansas. I think Oklahoma State could wind up in the exact same position that they found themselves a year ago, which was, if we remember, win and maybe you're in the college football playoff in a Big 12 championship game scenario. Remember that 6 inches right at the end, diving for the pylon? Who's going to win? You know, Baylor won the Big 12, and we just kind of forgot about Oklahoma State. Mike Gundy is a really good coach, Every year, they've got a solid offense. They've got a quarterback in Spencer Sanders that is playing really good football, and they will be there in the end. That team is quietly, no one talking about them, lurking, sitting there, could potentially make a CFP run. Now, you might be asking yourself, like, Joel, I knew it. You're such an SEC hater. Why'd you leave Ole Miss, LSU, and Tennessee off of this list? Well, let me address that really quickly. I don't think anybody expects, and certainly I don't expect Ole Miss or Tennessee to roll out there and win their division. I just don't. Tennessee still has to play Georgia. They still have Bama on their schedule. Ole Miss still has to play Bama. I don't see it. LSU is similar to that. Those teams are not in the hemisphere of Georgia and Alabama. The other teams that I brought up here, outside of Penn State, they don't have that hurdle in front of them like these SEC teams. Penn State has proven that they can beat Ohio State. They did win the Big 12, or excuse me, the Big 10 championship. I called the game with Trace McSorley and Saquon Barkley. We don't have that history with Ole Miss and Tennessee. Maybe with LSU, but you really think that this LSU team, they're struggling to get these wins. You look up at the end of the day and it's like their record is way better than the team that we see on the field. So that's the reason that I left them out. Nothing more, nothing less.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoy that clip, make sure you click subscribe somewhere down here. From game highlights to exclusive interviews and rankings, we've got everything you need as a college football fan right here, College Football on Fox.